Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a little girl, barely more than a toddler, right? She's fled this unimaginable life, and she crawls into the lap of a stranger, finds such safety, she just calls her Amma, mother.
Wow.
Or picture a simple grave marker, not some grand statue, but just a plain bird bath, and inscribed on it is just that one word.
Amma. Those images, yeah, they come straight from the sources we've gathered for today, and they really hint at the extraordinary depth and impact of the life we're diving into. Amy Carmichael.
Absolutely. Amy Carmichael, she's an Irish missionary, spent over 50 years in India, and left behind this truly remarkable legacy, and just a wealth of writings, too.
Mm-hmm.
We've pulled together a stack of articles, biographies, her own words, actually, that give us different angles on her life, her incredibly challenging work, and, well, some really crucial implications of her ministry for how we think about faith and life today.
Yeah, and our mission, really, for this deep dive is to trace Amy Carmichael's compelling story, maybe wrestle a bit with some of the significant debates she navigated, especially what our sources are calling the historical divided mind that affected so much of, well, Western thought and missions back then.
Right.
And ultimately, we want to extract the most powerful and relevant lessons that resonate right now, kind of get past the information overload and find the really important insights in this material for you.
So let's jump in. Who was Amy, and where did this all start for her? She was born into a pretty well-off family, Northern Ireland, 1867, but her path started shifting quite early on, didn't it?
It did. The sources point to this really pivotal moment. She was just 17, walking home from church with her brothers in Belfast, and she sees this poor elderly woman just struggling under a heavy bundle of firewood.
Okay.
And they stopped to help her, but as they were helping, other people from their church just walked right past them. And in that moment, Amy felt this flash of, well, shame, maybe, embarrassment.
Oh.
And then, really powerfully, she felt like she heard words from a Bible passage, 1 Corinthians 3, about work being tested by fire and only the eternal things lasting. That experience, it seems, just solidified something really profound for her. From that day, she apparently committed that nothing else would matter except the things that were eternal.
And that wasn't just some, vague spiritual idea. It had immediate practical impact. She was the oldest of 7, right?
Yeah.
So she threw herself into caring for her younger siblings with this completely new intensity.
And then she felt drawn to serve the Shawleys. These were factory girls in Belfast, too poor for hats, so they wore shawls instead.
Right.
She started ministry to them, shared the gospel, and when she needed a bigger space, she prayed very specifically for a building. And while the funds came through, an early lesson, the sources suggest, an absolute dependence on God.
That pattern seems key, passionate service, fueled by this focus on eternity and this dependence on God. And that eventually led her to look beyond Ireland.
Exactly. She was influenced by things like global missions conferences, figures like Hudson Taylor, founder of the China Inland Mission. She felt a clear call. The sources say she heard the words, "Go ye," just repeated in her heart.
Go ye. So where did that call take her first?
First stop was Japan in 1893. She was 24. It turned out to be a relatively short stay, only about 15 months, partly because she had some severe health issues like neuralgia.
Okay, 15 months isn't long.
No, but the sources note that even that brief time was significant. It was actually in Japan that she started adopting local dress. That's an approach she'd use later in India, too.
Interesting.
After Japan, she had short periods in China and Sri Lanka before finally arriving in India in 1895. And that's where she'd spend the rest of her life.
Initially, though, her work was more, let's say, conventional, like itinerant evangelism.
That's right. Traveling around southern India, learning the local language, Tamil. But everything really changed, fundamentally, around 1901.
And that's because she met Prina.
That's the moment, as you mentioned at the start, this little girl who had escaped just horrific abuse as a temple prostitute. When Prina clung to Amy, calling her Amma, mother, Amy was faced with this immediate, very concrete need.
Yeah, the sources describe her really wrestling with this. There's a Tamil saying, apparently, children tie the mother's feet, meaning they hold you back. And she wondered, would caring for this one child, this seemingly menial labor, distract her from her planned evangelism, her sort of career as a traveling missionary?
But she prayed. Intensely, apparently, asking for clarity. And the answer came, well, quickly and pretty dramatically. More children also escaped from temple slavery and abuse, started showing up.
Just showing up.
Yeah. Children who've been dedicated to the gods, sometimes branded, facing just terrible exploitation.
Oh, that's horrifying.
Absolutely. And seeing that, Amy realized this was her mission. She dedicated her life to rescuing these children. and that led her to establish the Dohnavur Fellowship.
Dohnavur.
It became a refuge, a genuine family, eventually saved over 1,000 girls and later boys, too.
Incredible.
Yeah.
But this work, it wasn't exactly met with universal acclaim, was it? Even among Christians.
No, not at all. Our sources mention, obviously, intense opposition from Hindu priests who benefited from that system of temple prostitution. They even took her to court at one point, though the case was dismissed. But yeah, she also faced criticism from some fellow missionaries.
Wow, criticism from other missionaries. That seems wild. Why would other Christians object to rescuing abused children? What was the reasoning?
Okay, this is where that historical context our sources describe becomes absolutely crucial. Many missionaries at the time, and Christians in the West more broadly, were heavily influenced by what's called the divided mind.
A divided mind. What does that mean exactly?
Well, the sources trace this back through centuries, actually, of Western thought. But at its core, it's a separation, a division, right? Between the spiritual realm, faith, religion, the soul, and the material or secular realm, the physical world, work, science, society, the body.
Okay, so like putting faith in one box over here and your everyday life in a completely separate box over there.
Exactly like that. And this idea, it has roots way back in ancient Greek philosophy, actually, where the spiritual or the ideal world was seen as superior and the physical world was seen as inferior, maybe even bad.
Which is really different from the original biblical view, right? Which sees all of creation, physical and spiritual, as fundamentally good because God made it.
Precisely. But this Greek idea it blended with Christian thought over time, unfortunately.
How did that play out?
Well, sometimes it showed up in early heresies that really struggled with the idea of Jesus being fully God, spirit and fully human body. Later on, especially with the rise of modern science and the Enlightenment, you saw this big split emerge. Reason, science, the physical world that was seen as objective reality, while faith, religion, the spiritual stuff that got pushed into the realm of subjective private belief.
So the real world was science and facts, and faith was just sort of a personal feeling.
Pretty much, and this fact-value split deeply impacted how faith was lived out, especially in the West. Some parts of the church reacted by focusing almost entirely on subjective experience, others reacting against modern ideas that seemed to dismiss God altogether, maybe overemphasize defending core doctrines. That's where you get the fundamentalist movement the sources mention.
And in reacting against science and secularism, did they maybe unintentionally adopt that same divided mind themselves by separating so sharply?
That's exactly what the sources suggest. In an effort to protect the spiritual from what they saw as the corrupting secular world, they sometimes ended up withdrawing from that world.
So things like science, politics, social issues.
Yeah, anything related to the physical, material world could be seen as worldly distractions. The only thing that really mattered was saving souls for the next life.
Okay. So evangelism was the only real mission. Everything else was secondary.
For many, yes. And this deeply affected the global missions movement. Many people went out with incredible zeal, absolutely, but this divided mind meant they often prioritized evangelism almost exclusively. Social action, caring for physical needs, things like building schools or hospitals or, rescuing children were sometimes viewed suspiciously.
Like it wasn't the real work. Or maybe just a distraction.
Exactly. Or maybe just a tool, A means to an end, a way to get people to listen to the gospel, but not something valuable in and of itself. The sources mention D.L. Moody's famous lifeboat metaphor.
I think I've heard that. Remind me.
The idea was the world is like a sinking wreck, and the missionary's job is just to pull as many people out into the lifeboat, meaning salvation, as possible before the whole thing goes down.
Which doesn't sound like there's much concern for the people still on the wreck or the wreck itself, beyond just getting individuals off.
Right. And the consequence, as our sources highlight, is that even today, many churches are strong internally, maybe, but can struggle to make a really meaningful impact on the wider society. Because faith has been compartmentalized, separated from those so-called secular areas of life like work or politics or addressing injustice, it leads to this idea that real Christian service is only for pastors or missionaries, which sort of suggests that someone working in, business or the arts or teaching is doing something less spiritual.
And Amy Carmichael's life just completely blew that idea out of the water, didn't it? Her work building a home, caring for children's actual physical bodies was her spiritual mission. There was no division for her.
Precisely. She saw the soul and the body as intrinsically linked. Her famous response to critics was pretty cutting, actually. Souls are more or less firmly attached to bodies.
I like that.
She practiced what our sources call a biblically balanced, integrated ministry. Rescuing the physical body, caring for the spiritual soul, they were two sides of the same coin for her. She refused to let that historical divided mind dictate her understanding of God's work.
That makes so much sense. It wasn't just about saving a soul from a body, but seeing the whole person, body and soul, as created and loved by God.
Yes, and seeing God's redemptive plan as encompassing all of creation, not just individual souls detached from everything else, she found herself right in the middle of that debate, just by living out a more holistic understanding of the gospel message.
Okay, so looking at her life and wrestling with this historical context, this divided mind idea,
Yeah.
what are some of the key takeaways? What are the crucial lessons we can glean from these sources about Amy Carmichael?
Well, one really powerful lesson is how she found joy in serving Christ by serving others. I mean, right from helping that beggar woman as a teen to rescuing those children, her focus wasn't on abstract spiritual concepts, but on meeting the concrete needs right in front of her.
And the sources really emphasize that she wasn't looking for earthly recognition at all. She famously hated any kind of fuss,
Yeah.
didn't care if her books were bestsellers. She just wanted them to be truthful and to glorify God. Her eyes were fixed on a heavenly reward, not earthly praise.
Absolutely. It reminds me of that line from the hymn Be Thou My Vision, riches I heed not, nor man's empty praise. Her focus was just singular.
And speaking of focus, there's that incredible quote about her fire within that really stands out.
Yes, and this is particularly relevant when you think about the last 2 decades of her life. After some serious falls, she was basically bedridden for nearly 20 years.
20 years.
Yeah. Yet she continued to lead the Dohnavur Fellowship. She wrote, I think, 35 books and maintained this intense ministry of prayer all from her bed.
So even when she couldn't do the physical work anymore, the ministry didn't just stop.
Not at all. As she put it, and this is powerful, it is not the place where we are or the work that we do or cannot do that matters. It is something else. It is the fire within that burns and shines, whatever be our circumstances.
Oh.
Her example really shows that God looks at the heart, right? The spirit within, not just our external activity or our physical capabilities.
Where did that inner strength, that fire, where did it come from?
The sources consistently point to one thing: her deep, intimate communion with Jesus. She knew she couldn't possibly endure the immense challenges of her work, the trauma she saw, the opposition, the physical toll, without being profoundly close to the Lord.
So it wasn't just like reading the Bible or praying at God, but a real back-and-forth relationship.
Exactly. She urged others to spend a lot of time in quietness, just listening, being sensitive and obedient, even to the slightest whisper of guidance, as she put it. This constant, real communion was the absolute core of her endurance. It fueled her resolve.
Yeah, and that resolve. The sources often describe it as being incredibly stubborn, like a steel wall sometimes.
Yeah. Yes, but it was a stubbornness aimed entirely at keeping the main thing, the glory of Jesus and the souls and bodies of those she served. She had what the sources call a single eye for God's glory. Didn't want to be distracted by anything lesser.
Mm-hmm.
She understood that while evangelism is vital, absolutely, the goal is discipling whole people and impacting communities. It's about comprehensive transformation, not just conversions.
And her prayer life was directly tied to her work and her confidence in God's provision, wasn't
Absolutely. She prayed for everything: buildings, doctors, resources for the children, and she saw God provide, often without making the needs known publicly, because she fundamentally believed that if the work was God's, He would take care of the finances.
That's deeply challenging.
It is. The sources kind of suggest that maybe our lack of bold prayer often reveals a lack of confidence in God's willingness or maybe His ability to provide for His work.
Ooh, that hits hard. What about something practical, something for just daily life?
Yeah, there's a fascinating insight about discernment. She emphasized recognizing activities that truly re-equip you, that fill you spiritually, versus those that just leak spiritual power, as she said.
Leak spiritual power. Interesting.
Even things like recreation, she thought, needed to be for genuine re-equipment, not just draining distraction.
So being really intentional about what you let into your life, what you give your time and energy to.
Yes, absolutely. Disciplining yourself towards what brings grace, what nourishes your soul, and eliminating what dampens your passion for God. That feels like a vital insight for navigating our always-on world today, doesn't it?
It really does. And finally, her deep commitment to love and family. Dohnavur wasn't an institution, was it? She insisted it was a family, based on God's love.
Totally. She even had this kind of filter for communication she taught the children. Before speaking, ask, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it kind? Is it necessary? Does it have the seed of eternity in it?
Wow. Imagine applying that filter to our online conversations today.
Wouldn't that change things? Yeah. But at the core of her life, it was sacrificial love, fueled by God's love for her, which then overflowed into a love for others that asked not how little, but how much can I give? She reflected that self-giving love right to the very end.
It seems her life wasn't just about training people for traditional missionary work like we might think. It was about showing what it means to live a truly Christian life, imitating God's self-giving love for others, especially the most vulnerable, wherever you happen to be.
Exactly. If God's Spirit lives in us, that heart should lead us towards self-sacrifice for others, whatever our circumstances are, whatever our work is.
And this brings us right back to that central tension we discussed earlier, that divided mind versus Amy's integrated life. Her example just powerfully demonstrates that caring for physical needs and sharing the spiritual truth of the gospel aren't separate jobs at all.
No.
They're interwoven expressions of Christ's love for the whole person and really for the whole world.
She simply refused to be limited by that historical tendency to split the sacred from the secular. For her, rescuing a child's body was part of saving their soul. It was all one piece.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the sources on Amy Carmichael, I mean, what a life defined by profound love, unwavering faith, relentless service, incredible endurance. We really see a powerful integrated faith that challenged the norms of her time and honestly still challenges us today.
Right. Her legacy really stands as this clear counterexample to that historical divided mind. It shows another way is possible.
And that challenge leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener, to consider. Given this historical tendency we've talked about to divide faith in daily life, and then seeing Amy Carmichael's incredibly integrated example, how does your understanding of serving Christ extend beyond traditional religious activities?
Yeah, think about the seemingly secular parts of your daily life, your job, your relationships, your engagement with the needs, and maybe the injustices you see around you. How can your faith inform and integrate with those areas? How can it be all one piece for you?
How can your fire within burn and shine, whatever your circumstances might be, or the work that you do or cannot do, just as Amy's did, even from her sickbed for 20 years?
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the sources about Amy Carmichael.